Guys, welcome to a classic film review of 1971's The Omega Man, starring Charlton Heston as the last man on Earth. Here, a plague's wiped out a huge percentage of the population and left the survivors as sunlight-fearing half-zombies. It's based on the 1954 novel by Richard Matheson, and the reason its plot might sound familiar is because it was remade in 2007 using the book's original title, I Am Legend, starring Will Smith. If you've only ever seen that version, then you're in for a bit of a treat here, because this thing is a giddy fusion of serious pandemic-related mass death and hilarious 70s fashion and lingo. Let's take a look. So here we are in the near future, the year 1977. Most of mankind has been wiped out by the ravages of a biological war between Russia and China, with the survivors left as sunlight-fearing mutants. Now, at ground zero, we have Charlton Heston playing Army Dr. Robert Neville, who is immune to this super plague, having developed an experimental vaccine against it. Now, believing himself to be the only true human left alive, he now spends his days hunting down the mutant's nest in a creepy, deserted Los Angeles, and spends his nights barricaded in alone as they attack his apartment.
Robert!
Now, it's no real spoiler to reveal that Neville isn't actually the only person left alive. He soon bumps into Lisa, played by Rosalind Cash, a black militant who's revealed to be looking after a small commune of children who haven't yet been infected. And she's assisted by a biker buddy named Dutch, played by Paul Koslow. So one of the great things about The Omega Man is how 70s it all really is. And that's fine in terms of the plot. It's set in the late 70s, of course, so it's not like it's set in some distant future. So it's fashions and hairstyles and stick it to the man jive talking don't really jar that much, but it's great to see how the original author's idea of the plague victims becoming more traditional vampires is here translated into a cult known as the Family. The late 60s and early 70s seemingly being rife with cult activity, from the Manson family to the Heaven's Gate cult, so it makes sense to prey on those fears. And I hear the family dress in black satanic robes to hide their pale faces and mutated eyes from the sunlight. Now, in all honesty, they don't come across as the most threatening or scary antagonists and do more preaching than actual killing. Charlton Heston's more than willing to help them, but also takes obvious delight in blowing them away with his extensive rifle collection. Now, the leader of the mutant cult is Matthias, played by Anthony Zerbe, clearly having the time of his life here. His face-off with Neville basically involves them laying siege to his apartment using catapults and fire, but it never really feels like Neville's in that much danger. And that's something the Will Smith version did a little bit better, I feel. Those out-of-control, rabid dog attack sequences where you survive by the skin of your teeth. Here it's just... So much like the novel, the film touches on the inherent loneliness and the psychological impact of having no other human contact. Neville spends his time playing chess against himself, talking to mannequins and having odd episodes where he's convinced that an imaginary phone is ringing somewhere.
There is no phone ringing, damn it!
And I do love a good post-apocalyptic movie, and The Omega Man does a good job with its feeling of isolation. And it's almost a shame then that so many of the cast members have to arrive on the scene. Now, there's some ill-advised, heavy-handed symbolism, probably requested by Heston himself, obviously painting himself as a messiah figure. And there is, unfortunately, not a great deal of chemistry between Heston and Rosalind Cash, but props to the production for featuring an international relationship at a time when that still had a fair air of controversy.
If you were the only girl in the world and I were the only boy, okay, but till then, don't bother me. I guess I'm the only boy.
Now, Charlton Heston kind of just does what Charlton Heston does here in The Omega Man. I mean, whether he's playing Moses in The Ten Commandments or he's playing Taylor in Planet of the Apes, his kind of gritted teeth, take charge, holier-than-thou routine is well suited to the only man who can save humanity role. And maybe one of the issues I have with The Omega Man is that Heston maybe doesn't display enough despair. I've personally never been the last man on Earth with a horde of mutant loonies after me, but I certainly wouldn't be as laid back as Heston is here. And the film lacks any real sense of dread and desperation because of that. Now, this era in movies has Charlton Heston morphing into an action star. Films like this and Skyjacked, the Three Musketeers films, and the Airport films, all coming as he moved into middle age. Now, regardless of how you felt about his politics, he was a member of that now sadly gone breed of rough and ready actors. I think James Coburn and Charles Bronson and Lee Marvin, etc. Now, the whole thing's competently directed by Boris Sagal, or Sagal. Apologies if I'm not 100% on how to pronounce that. He directed hundreds of episodes of TV and lots of TV movies also. I think the only other feature film of his that I've seen is 1969's Mosquito Squadron with David McCullough and Charles Gray. So yeah, the whole thing is campy as hell. The mutant albino cult is so shoddy it's a giddy joy to watch them all spout COD philosophy. And if you stumbled upon it, there'd be no question you were watching a 70s movie. Any African-American characters feel like they've wandered off the set of a blaxploitation film.
I know how to roll, but it's hard on the elbows. And if you just have to play James Bond, I'll bust your ass.
Yes, ma'am.
Heston's wardrobe is either safari suits and huge collars, or he's topless, which I think he manages to sneak into most of his films. Anyway, it's a brilliant product of its time. Heston even spending his days watching Woodstock on a loop in an abandoned cinema. The outside world far removed from that peace and love being promised on the screen. So this was actually the second time that I Am Legend novel had been filmed. Originally shot as The Last Man on Earth in 1964, starring Vincent Price. Now, I actually haven't seen that version, I don't think, so that's definitely going on my watch list. But reading about it, it seems that each of the three versions that have been filmed so far are very different from one another, which is interesting in itself. I'm just not sure we could cope with another adaptation in light of what's happened in the real world with mass infection and lockdowns. The fiction in science fiction slowly starting to fade away. But go check this out.
He was the last of those who brought the punishment to us. We have cleansed and purged his world. Now we must build.
Build coffins. That's all you'll need.